Hello, welcome to your next class in Fragments. In last two lectures, we learned some basics about the fragments. In next two lectures, we will learn how to create a program or a mobile app using fragments. We will try to implement all the concepts that we have learned. So please look at my screen carefully and try to write your own program as I do this. So number one is that let's first start a program. So I go to the file, I go to new project. I give the application name. Let us say Fragment Basics because we are only going to do some basic operations here. I go next, I choose phone and tablet. Then I go next, I create an empty activity. For activity name, I do not really change it and I can just say finish. Now Android Studio is creating my project. Many of you have mentioned that you are getting problems which says that such a library does not exist. If all these cases are there, first please try to look at your import statements that what you are importing. And second, try to look that whether whatever you are importing is actually available or not. For example, you may be importing a library for which you have not added a dependency. So you need to do both in order to make your program run. Now, for example, we now have our basic application created. We will make few changes into it to make it an application for using fragments. Currently this is just a basic application which uses an empty activity. So the first thing that I am going to change is that I will change the extents to fragment activity instead of app compat activity. So I type fragment activity. Now at this point of time, the Android Studio gives you a choice to either import the android.support.v4 support library or the android.app. I will choose the first one because this is the version of the support library. So let me choose it. And now you see that my import statement has changed and it is saying android.support.v4.app.fragment. Now let me go and add the library to it. If I see the Android Studio is still showing it red because it cannot find this library. So now let me go into the file, new, file, and then come to project structure. In the project structure, I have a small thing called app. So you can see app here. So I go into this. When I click app, I see these tabs. I will go to the last tab called dependencies. And in here you can see that app compat v7 is already there, something which I am using in the import, but there is nothing like v4 here. So I will press a plus and I will choose library dependency. This will open another dialog box and the second entry says support-v4 com.android.support support-v4 24.2.0. This is the support library that we want to use in our program. I have earlier asked you to use the support library for developing Fragment rather than the Android OS version. There are multiple reasons for it. Number one, that the support library support Android devices which are as old as running Android 1.6. Number two, that support libraries are updated more often. Number three, that because you are using a support library, if a new library comes, if a new version of library comes with an advanced feature, all you need to do is add the newer library in your APK and everything is fine. So there are ample reasons to use the support library for development, and that is what you should do. So let me select it, press OK. This now appears in my dependencies. and I will now press OK, and that is it. Now you can see that Android has again started building my project, and after some time this error will go away as soon as my project is built. So let us wait for it. Yes, so now it is gone. Now the next step is to look into the layout file and see what kind of layout we currently have. So as you see that we have the default layout which Android always gives us. Let me change it to the text. So I would like to change it. I would like to just make it a very simple layout. I will call it fragment frame layout, because in this layout I can put my fragments. As we have already discussed that fragments views are inserted into a placeholder, and that placeholder is usually provided by the activity. So I will remove this. Okay, I will remove this. I will then add another field, Android ID. We have used it at multiple times. Sorry. Add plus ID, and I will give it the ID name as fragment container. Please remember this name. Layout width, layout height I will add. Not going to use any margin. I'm not going to use any text field. I am missing one, and this completes the layout file for my activity that will be using a fragment. As you can see, I'm not giving much. I'm just giving an ID so that I can refer to this layout in my program later. The design is also very simple. It doesn't do. So now we are ready, and the next step that we are going to do is to first add a fragment to our program. Once we have added a fragment to our program, then we will try to see that how do we bring that fragment into the activity. So in order to add a fragment to our program, I will go to the Java. I will go to the main package definition. I right click, I go to new. Now you will see that I can either add a fragment by just clicking on Java class, that is making a basic Java file, and then writing my own code, or I can go down to the fragment and I can choose one of the three fragment options. For the time being, we will use a simpler version because our fragment is very basic. So let me click on Java class. I will give this name as basic fragment. Again, I am using fragment as a suffix so that anyone else who looks at my program knows that this class is actually a fragment. So I press OK, and I see that a basic class has been added. But this is currently a simple Java class. I want to change it to a fragment. So I will go to the first line and I will say it extends fragment. Again, I have a choice of two imports, fragment which is coming from support.v4 and fragment which is coming from Android OS. I will choose the v4 version. This will add an import statement, and this is all fine. Now let me do two things. Number one, if you remember correctly, that we need to definitely override a method called on create view. So let us override that method at public void on create. Oh, sorry, I would have to first complete this at override public void on create view. Now this method takes three parameters. One is a layout inflator. Let's call it inflator. Second is a view group container. Let's call it container. And third is a bundle. And let's call the bundle saved instant state. So I am using the default standard names. This is usually a good practice because then you know by the variable that what kind of type this variable holds. So bundle again it cannot resolve, so I will have to press Alt Enter, which will add another import, and now everything is fine. Now when we implement the onCreate view, we will have to first create a view and return it. Now if we try to create a view, we will have to call the method which is known as inflate. The inflate method, if you see here, let me go back a little. If you see here, then the inflate method takes three parameters. The first of that is a resource ID. Now which resource ID you should provide? Well, because we are trying to inflate our fragment, we need to provide the resource ID of our fragment layout. But so far we have not created any fragment layout because we chose to create our fragment file by just extending a normal Java class file. So let me first create another layout which corresponds to my fragment and whose ID I can give here. So I will go to layout, I click new, I click a layout resource file and I give the file name as fragment underscore layout or fragment underscore basic to correspond to our name. I choose this. Oh, I'm sorry. So let me first create the layout file. I go to new and I click on XML, and on the XML I choose layout XML file. In this it asks me for the layout file name. I call it fragment underscore basic, and my root tag is linear layout, which is fine with me. I click it and it creates a XML file corresponding to my fragment. Let me show what is happening here. So yes, I have created this new file called Fragment Basic, and we will now see what is in the Fragment Basic. So in Fragment Basic there is nothing but just an empty linear layout. I am fine with it. I will just add a small text so that we recognize when our fragment has been imported into the activity. So all I will do is I will just do an added text and width is fine with match parent, height is fine with, let us say, wrap content. I will have to add an ID, Android Well, actually, I need not to add an ID here because I will not be using it. But let me just say I want to display a hint, which is enter a sentence or enter a word. So this is a very basic linear layout. Let me see its design. It is just giving me an added text with a hint of enter a word. And let us see also the layout of our application. Our activity doesn't have anything. So when our activity imports fragment, we should see this display. Okay, so now let's go back to our basic fragment. And now we have something to give when the inflate field asks us. I will do to r dot layout dot. Now you can see that I am getting the option of fragment basic. So let me edit the fragment basic here. The second field is easy. I can just give container, and the third usually is false. When we go further, sometimes we will change this variable. A good idea could also be, if you want to try what happens, maybe try to convert it to true into some of your examples and see. For view, so now I have added another import statement. So now my view is recognized, and then I am doing nothing but just returning my view. Oh, sorry. So I have made a wrong definition. It is not void, but it is view. So view on create view. So now my basic method is complete. I would like to discuss a very small but important thing here. Let's go to activity. In activity, we have an onCreate method which we override, and this onCreate method is protected. Now let's go to fragment. In fragment, we have an equivalent method called onCreateView, and we override that as well, but that method is public. Can you understand the reason why? Think about it. As some of you may have guessed, it needs to be public because this will be called from an activity. So this will be called from outside, and that's why it needs to be public. Now we have created a basic activity, we have created a basic fragment. So far we have not imported that fragment into the activity. But let's run our program to see what our program looks now and what it will look once we import the fragment. So I will use a Nexus 6P emulator API 23. I keep using it till the Nougat, Android Nougat and API 24 and X7 have been released to the public. So let me do the run. Our emulator is starting. It's taking time. Now what do you expect to see? Well, in current example, actually we have not done much. Only thing that we expect to see is the basic layout of the activity. However, it is important to see that so that when our activity actually brings a fragment in, we can identify the difference. So let's wait. So yes, our activity has started and there is nothing here as expected. Now, let us write rest of the code to bring the fragment into the activity. Earlier, I had discussed that there are two ways to do this. One is to make changes in the XML file of the activity. Number two is to write a code which brings the fragment. And we also discussed that what is the positive of one approach versus another. And normally if you want to work with fragments dynamically, it is always good to use the code approach because that gives you the flexibility. Now let us start writing the code that will bring the fragment into the activity. So first I need fragment manager. Let me call it FM, or let me call it fragment manager. I get the fragment manager by making call to a method called get support fragment manager. The second I need to create the fragment object. Create the fragment object, and the first thing I try to do is to find that if there is such fragment already in the system. So let me just call fragment manager dot find fragment by ID, and we will pass it the ID of the container that it has. So if you remember, I had asked you to remember this ID. This refers to the layout of the activity. We will pass it because we want to know if there is any fragment in this container. So r dot layout dot id dot fragment container, and once we do this, we need to make a check that if it is returning null or if it is returning a non-null value. Because your activity goes into different life cycle stages, so when you start your program, it will obviously be null the very first time. However, once you start interacting on your Android device and your activity goes into different life cycle stages such as pause, stop, destroy, etc., there is a chance that in one of these states, your activity is hidden but is still alive. In those cases, this value will not be null. So that's why we make this check. So if it is null, we create a new fragment, and let's call it new basic fragment as we know. And now I want to start a transaction which will add this fragment to the activity. Fragment manager will begin transaction, and I want to add a fragment. Now I first need to give the ID where I want to add the fragment, and then the fragment that I want to add. So the first parameters means where I want to add, second is what I want to add, and after that I do commit, and that's it. Hopefully everything is fine. Let me run the program. Okay, so I made a mistake. I have an extra curly bracket. Yeah, so now everything is fine. Let me compile and run our program. So our program runs, and here you see now our view is changed. Our activity has actually brought in a fragment. So this is not just the activity layout, this is the fragment layout that we are seeing. So this is the basic fragment application which is showing you how to bring a fragment in an activity using the code. Now let us add some log messages to understand the different state transitions between activity and fragment and between the different states of the activity and of the fragment. Just like last time, we are going to add the log statements and see how they are played out. Let's first stop. We go to our main activity and we try to extend all the other methods. We try to override them. First, I will have to also declare a private static final string tag equal to main activity, and then we have added the same methods. I've copied them from my another file. Now we go to the fragment. We first add the tag, which is again the same private static final string tag equal to basic fragment. We now override all the other methods. So many of the methods are common with the activity, but then there are methods which are different. So for example, there is on create view and there is also an on create. So let me create a on create method. So unlike the so just like the activity, on create takes a bundle saved instance state, not going to do anything except calling the on create inside on create. So we have on create, we have on create view, we have now there are some other methods as well, such as on attach and on activity created in the fragment. So let's also do them. So I will first just make on, so on activity created. This also takes a bundle. Let's just call it B or maybe bundle. Then just call super dot on activity created bundle inside on activity created. So another newer method, or this method which exists in fragment was not in activity, is on attach, which takes a context. Let's call it C. It also asked me to import another file, which I have done. It should call just like other methods, super on attach context, and I will change the log entry to inside on attach. Now let us see if we are missing something. So actually we are, there are two more methods, on destroy view and on detach. So yes, we have on destroy view, we have on destroy, and we have another method called on destroy view. So let us implement that on destroy view. Okay, why it is showing it? I typed it twice. And then the only method left is on detach. So let me also change that to on detach as well. On detach, on detach. Okay, inside on detach. Fine. So now we have overridden all the methods of the life cycle of a fragment. We have also overridden all the methods of the life cycle of an activity, and we have added log messages to them. This is not necessary in a normal program to override all the methods, but we want to see the interplay between the fragment and the activity, and we also want to see how and when different life cycle methods of activity and fragments are called. So let us clear our log and run the program now. We will now concentrate on our log window because we have already seen what our program displays. So we will just concentrate on our log window to see that how different methods and when these different methods are being called. So let me start the execution and let's start watching the log window. So I will say set a filter of inside, and I'm hoping that oh, well, I think okay, so there was some log but we didn't see it. I want to see why it happened. We are not seeing. Oh, so I think we by mistake we removed all our log. Let's start the execution again and see. So now we start. Yes. So now we can see. Let's try to put a filter of inside. I'm changing to verbose. So now you see that uh, the very first our fragments on attach, on create, on activity created, and on start gets called before the on start and on resume of main activity is called, but after the on resume of activity is called, our fragments on resume has been called. This is as we learned last time in our lecture. Let me open those slides for you as well so that you can once again look at it. So as you see, this is what is happening. We knew that let us set it up correctly. Yeah, so So yes, you see that for the fragment on attach, on create, on activity created, etc. have been called with the created aspect. Then activity started on start is called of the fragment, activity resume on resume is called of the fragment. Now let us try to interact with our application. What happens say when we press home? When we pressed home, you can see that our fragment went into on pause and our activity went into on pause, our fragment went into on stop, our activity called on stop. This is again as we had discussed here, when the activity is paused on pause, when the activity is stopped on stop. Now let's bring back and again you see start on resume. Then let's kill it. Now you see that on pause, on stop, as we know that on pause and on stop get called before the destroy. Then the activity before the activity goes into on destroy, fragment has to destroy its view, go into on destroy and detach, and then the on destroy of the activity is called. So something like this: on destroy view, on detach. So on destroy view, on destroy view, on destroy, on detach, exactly as we learned last time. So now you have created a very basic fragment and you have called it from an activity. In the next lecture, we will make it slightly more interesting, where we will create two fragments inside the same activity, and then we will also call activity from fragment, and we will also call a fragment from the activity. That is, we will use a callback method to take the transfer from the fragment to the activity, and similarly from the activity we will get a reference to the fragment and come back into the fragment. Thank you and keep coding.